Okay, so I hope you've seen part one of how we got the batteries into the battery box. How we got them connected, turned on the BMS and showed you how the BMS operated. So in this video I'm going to show you how we've restrained the batteries underneath the lid and how the lid holds the batteries into place once it's all fitted. So let's do it. Okay, so we're just working on this, filling in this gap here. So we've got these pieces here, which I'll put in and show you where they go. So these pieces with a lock cert or nut cert in them, that sits between the front of the battery and sits on top of the BMS and holds the whole BMS assembly towards the front. It locks it in against the box, so it basically stops all the batteries sliding forward. And then there's a secondary piece that goes over top that'll screw down and hold everything into place. So we'll get the bottom section in first, and then we'll put the top section over top. Okay, so that's these pieces here of what's going to stop it going forward. It looks like there's a gap there, but it's not. There's heavy duty rubber in front of that. So once these pieces are fitted into position, the whole battery pack can't move forward. It's because it will just push against those pieces. So now we're going to overlay the next piece that goes on top, and that'll clip over the front edge of the batteries and over the top of the whole assembly that actually goes right through to the lower section of batteries. So once we get this screwed down and a piece on top, then the batteries, the bottom row of batteries and the top row of batteries can't move. Alrighty, so we've got the front support in now. So this piece here will stop the whole entire battery pack from being able to slide forward. It also stops the bottom row of batteries and the second row of batteries at the front here from being able to move upwards. Once the block goes in between the top of this panel here and the lid, that'll be firmly held, and there'll be another couple of pieces go in over the next two rows of batteries, which will stop those batteries from being able to move upwards. So everything will be pinned down once the lid goes on, and this will be a very safe battery pack. Alrighty, so now we're just figuring out some ways to fix the batteries in position so they can't move in the upwards position. We know they can't move forwards and backwards, but obviously they can move upwards. So I've made one block in here, which we'll see if we can get that out, which will go into that space there. And yeah, so it's got rubber on the back side, which goes down to the batteries, and then we're just packing it up on the top so it comes up under the lid, and then the pressure of the lid will keep this in position once the lid goes on. So we've got that one made up. Now I'm working on the next row of batteries, and we're going to make sure that some rubber goes through between those. So I've got two, I've got what's that, 3 mil of rubber, I think, which will go through there to protect it, even though I'm not that concerned. I know it's not going to move. There's about a 6 mil gap between the casing and the bus bar, which is ample, but it'll have 2 layers of rubber in between there as well, so it's not going to be a problem. And we'll make sure any bolts that get put in do not protrude past any of the nut certs that are in there as well. So we've got some more of the high density board here, which we're gluing to the rubber, or the rubber too, and we'll build that up now so it fits into that position. Alright, so some of the rubber I'm using for this is self-adhesive, but the thinner stuff isn't, so I'm just using the quick grip spray adhesive, which works really fast to just glue them all together, and it holds really well, so it makes the job a lot easier than just trying to slide bits of rubber in without having them adhered to each other and have them moving. Now everything, once it's glued into position, will be steadfast. Right, so I hope you can see that, but as you can see there, we've got 2 layers of rubber that now go over top of that terminals on batteries 14 and 15, which will protect the terminals from any contact with the nut cert above. Even though there's 6 mil of clearance there, now it's also got 3 mil of rubber in between the connection link between batteries 14 and 15 and the nut cert above. Alrighty, so I've got all the blocks made up now that'll sit on top of the batteries and hold them down. So once the lid goes on, there'll be a slight bit of pressure holding these down on top of the terminals here, and a set of terminals under there, and then onto the top of the batteries here. We've put some slots on the bottom of this one here because it sits over top of the insulating membranes in between each of the batteries. So I didn't want that getting squashed down, so I just made some cutouts for that. And the one at the front holds the bottom row of batteries and the BMS and everything in position as well, and stops the whole assembly moving forward. So we'll put it all together and try the lid on it and make sure the lid's going to fit properly. And we'll have to cut some of the screws off, so because we don't want obviously screws going through into this stuff. So the screws going into the top that hold everything down will have to be the right length, so we might need to adjust a lot of the screws so we don't get screws protruding through the nutserts and also through the lid of the box that hold the control gear into place. So we'll put the lid on next and see how it's all going to line up. Okay, so we're just test fitting the lid. We've got 25mm screws, but they're not just biting in, so I might need to get some longer screws. The countersunk screws are okay. That's where the motor control is going. Yeah, so it's looking good so far, but yeah, I think I might have to, I can't put a spring washer under these, so I think I might have to get some longer screws for that. So we know the lid fits now. There's a few screw holes which hold on our controller and other bits and pieces on top of the box. Now underneath some of these screw holes we have the supports that hold the batteries down, but as you can see they're quite thick, so I'm going to put it back on a mark and drill probably 5mm or so into these, because now we've got plenty of distance there. It doesn't matter if the screws come into this area a little bit, especially there's nothing under there's nothing in this space back in here. So yeah, we'll just mark up where these come through so you can sort of see them, but we're going to make sure everything's in the correct positions in here, and then put this on, mark it, drill some little holes, vacuum anything out, and then we'll put the main active wire coming out through this hole in the box here, put that into position, and then once we've screwed the lid on, I won't be taking it off again because there will be no need to. So we'll put it on, we'll mark those where those holes come through from here and onto there. Give it a little bit of leeway so we can let the screws come through slightly when we're mounting the things on top of the box, and then put the lid on for the last time, unless it needs to come off for another inspection. But hopefully with all the videos and photos we shouldn't have to pull the bike apart again for the electrical inspections. It would be mainly for when they go to inspect how it's all connected on top, which was just take the tank off and check the wiring. So yeah, so we're going to put the lid on and we'll mark those and drill them so we can run the screws through the box up to around 5mm would be enough. Alright, so before we put the lid on the box and everything, we need to connect this one. It's got to go in underneath here, which goes up to our fuse, which we mounted up top on the box. This is the last sort of wire we've got to connect into the battery pack. Once all that's connected and all the cable glands and everything are fitted, we won't need to be taking the top off this box ever again. Alright, so now we're going to connect the main wire coming out from the battery. So we've already made sure that will fit in there, and then we need for the BMS to go on top. So the other BMS cables go over top. Actually, I'll put some heat shrink on that section there. Alright, so I was going to put this in before but realised I didn't have any protection on the lug, so I put some heat shrink on it to stop the BMS cables from rubbing on any metal parts. And so I just need to put that in, and then the BMS cable, if I can get it to stay there and not spring up all the time. Then we are adding a spring washer. Oh, getting very tight in here. And you can see why I've put tape on the next Next one, anything falling down there would short the batteries out. Don't like that. So now the nut, the last piece of the puzzle. Getting it on and getting it to start on the thread. Come on, please. Do this. Now I can touch the side of the box because I know that there is no connection, not like on a car where the frame is actually connected to the battery. In this case, this one is not. Doesn't give much room to move in it. We are on. There we go. So we've got that wire on. I'll just check the tension on it. And well, that's going to be hard to check tension. I'll actually have to try it on one of these bolts. See when it starts to move and then replicate that tension, which that's about right there. So there we go. So that main cable is connected. So now we can put all the locks back in and put the lid of the box on. Alrighty, so we've mounted the fuse holder on that this wire from the battery will connect onto, and we've got the cable glands and everything and the nut underneath. So we're going to feed all of these cables plus the BMS cables up under here, which are just hiding down there, through the box and fit the lid of the box on. Okay, so here we go. So we need to first feed the wire through, and again I'm going to make sure that nothing touches anything because I still don't like the fact that I've got metal and DC. It's a tight fit, but I've made it fit. Okay. Put that on there like that. And we can slide this over and the cap. So the first thing we need to do is actually do up the nut underneath. Make sure that's fairly tight. It's not going to go anywhere, so it doesn't have to be tensioned or anything like that because nothing's going to move, but you do need to make sure it is fairly tight. I'll just grab the spanner and put on that. So that doesn't have to be tight, but I don't want it loose either. So we'll just get a bit more of a nip than my fingers can do. There we go, really good. Now we need to feed it right out of this because I've got to get the box underneath this section. I've got to get the negative BMS cables fed up through the hole at the front of the box here to get everything into place. So, wriggle it through. Come on, wriggle. Everything's such a tight fit. So I start to lower this bit down there, feeding the cable through. Okay, so you might be able to see, probably not, but under there the cables now come up underneath there nicely in a good position. There we go. So if I put screws in, one. So I'm just going to put the countersunk screws into position, and that will hold the lid in one spot then. Stop anything from moving. I'll just double check that everything is sitting right. And this cable will be bolted down to there. It's pretty close to that, but it actually sits down lower than that because there's actually a nut sitting on there. So once all these go on, then there's a cover that goes over that whole fuse. And this all feeds into here. So seal at this point. Screws on that, and that gives that a good seal then. So there we go. So the lid's on the box. We've got our negative cable sticking out up here for the BMS. We've got this cable here secured so that it doesn't fling off anywhere and touch anything, even though the pack's dead at the moment because the BMS is turned off. And I've also got the discharge function within the BMS turned off, so between the negative and the positive there'll be nothing until I turn that part of the BMS on. So there we go, that's the lid on the box for the final time. Now next thing will be to start locking the lid down and fitting all the components to the top of the box. Although I haven't got the screws for that, so I might actually start adding the components to the top of the box instead.